we're going to do is look at the PCQ. You've got the two documents, but what you can do is also go onto Google and look for criticisms of the HDI. You'll find a heap of stuff. You'll find that document, that was one of the best ones that I came across. But there's lots of others that break it down very, very carefully and very simply. What you've got to be really careful of when using Google to do this is there's lots of sites out there that are very critical of the HDI. So you've got to have a look at what that site is and look at its reliability and validity, because you need to ensure that you're weighing up not just totally negative, you've got to look at the positives, and you've got to look at why are they saying it's negative and where are they coming from, what countries, are they educational facilities, are they universities, rather than just someone giving a bit of their opinion. And then we're going to rate it against a variety of different criteria, and then we're going to discuss it as a class. So what I'll do is, I'll get the actual PCQ up, and we'll have a look at it here. Okay, so here you've got your 4 columns. So you've got the criteria that we're going to evaluate it against. You've got your pros, you've got your cons, and you've got your questions. And we've done this before, so you know what you've got to do. So looking at the first criteria, validity. So how valid is this as an indicator of the standard of living in a country? So we're looking at things such as how well does the index actually measure human development? What is left out of this index? Okay, and we've spoken about those, so you've got the notes there. So environmental, political dimensions. Okay, give me a little bit more information. So I want you to look at the pros. I want you to look at the cons for that. Then I want you to pose some questions. Okay, questions could be, if we're looking at what is left out of this index, well, how does this index tell us how democratic or how corrupt the government is? What does it tell us about that? So they could be your questions. The next one is your reliability, the criteria of reliability. So who or what organisation collected the data? So how reliable is this data? How was the data collected? So how do they collect this? All right, you might have to do a little bit of research on the internet to find that out. In short, if you or someone else were to try to replicate the index, would you end up with more or less the same results? I'm going to give you a hint here when you're looking at the cons. The pros are the UN is the one who finalises all that data. But the individual country, and I think I said this to you last week, they collect their GDP, life expectancy, and literacy rates. And we spoke about this. Exactly, because depending on your GDP and depending on your literacy rates and depending on your life expectancy, often depends on how much age you get. And remember we spoke about Australia with a 100% literacy rate. That can be a flawed statistic, all right? So they're the types of things you're looking at.
Why do they do that?
Why? Yeah, because getting aid for your country is dependent on your GDP. So often they will give statistics that are falsified.
But a country like Australia doesn't need aid.
Well, no, what we spoke about, if you remember the other day when it came to literacy, we were talking about how when they do the census and people can't necessarily read the census if they're illiterate. So there are people who are illiterate. Remember I gave you the example when I went and helped out at the TAFE in illiteracy, and I found that there are lots of people who couldn't really read, but we have a 100% literacy rate in Australia.
This isn't obviously a completely accurate way to figure out literacy, because people who are illiterate can't do census. So it's just like, what's the point? Can you read right?
Yeah. And then, on top of that, if you're illiterate, even if someone else is filling it out for you, are you going to be totally honest?
No, you're not going to tell them that you can't read.
No, because there's a case that comes back, okay? And then the final criteria is called parsimony. Now, I tried to explain this, the quality of being careful with money or resources, all right? So, I suppose when we apply it to this, we look at the whole point of an index is to simplify the measurement of a particular phenomenon, all right? So, in short, does the index rely upon as few indicators as reasonably possible without undermining its validity? So, I spoke about before, if you use too many indices, indices, it becomes too complicated. Okay? So how many resources are we using that it's still a quality index? Alright, so that's parsimony. And then do your pros, your cons, and your questions. Now, while you're doing this, I want you to also be thinking, because we're going to be doing, obviously when you do a PCQ, you then take it further to make sure that you can, that you do understand what you've got from it. And you've got to work out, well, is it a good index or not? And so that will happen in our discussion. We'll look at specifically what indicators would you focus on if you were trying to measure human development. So what do you think are the most important? What do you value? And that becomes a judgment value, doesn't it? Hey, what the things that you value, your beliefs, your morals, your background, your culture, all comes into it. And would you measure human development differently than the Human Development Index? Why or why not? And you need to explain. You need to be able to justify. Okay, all clear? Any questions? You know what you're doing? Okay. All right. So we'll start on that. You can work in pairs to get this done, or you can work individually. Use the internet. Ask me questions. All right. Do it thoroughly. It could end up as a question in the exam. Okay.